What is up, you guys? We are here for our weekly energy oracle forecast. Just taking a look at the week ahead. Thank you for excusing my absence. I sat down to do our Secret Teachings of Jesus video last night, and I opened up the Gospel of Mary, and I was looking at about 6 paragraphs, and that's long for us, you know, when we go into real depth, and I was just empty. I had nothing, no energy to give. My voice was so tired. I've been filming a lot for the 2026 prediction series. And I had also been to a really cool event last night at a nearby church to see Monty Mader speak, and this guy, Brian, can't remember his last name, but he writes and speaks on deconstruction. He's a former evangelical pastor. Monty Mader's a former Christian nationalist who, you know, studied theology in Israel and is trying to do deconstruction as well. She's also a political commentator, so some of you might be familiar with her. But anyway, it was a really, really cool event. There was an artist who did some music. And it was sort of like going to church, really. It was a beautiful event. Most of the people there were roughly my age group, and we'd all come from generally the same backgrounds, because we were all asked a few questions, and everybody, you know, was standing who answered the questions, and we were, you know, told like little by little to sit down. And so it's like people in that room had a lot in common, which was interesting. And it was just a beautiful night. Very hopeful, very inspiring. So that was cool, but it was also very emotional. So by the time I got home, I was just kaput. So I was quiet, and I reflected on Advent, and I've been reading the Gospel of Luke. Apparently that's a really good thing to do during Advent, and maybe this is what Catholics always do. I don't know the details about Catholicism, pardon me, but I love mysticism. I love the things about, like, I'm drawn more and more to Catholicism. And so I've been reading the Gospel of Luke with my Hebrew transliteration Bible. So I'm reading it in Aramaic, and it's so wild how quickly, like, so many insights will come to me, and I'm just like filling up the pages with notes. And so there's all kinds of content that I want to create based on just the first 2 chapters of Luke. So I'm excited about that. So stay tuned for the second platform. That'll be the kind of content you can look forward to on that, which will be coming soon. I'll tell you more as we get nearer. All right, let's grab some cards. We will be looking ahead at this week's sort of general energy, the spiritual weather. This week in the Torah portion, we are with Joseph, as he has been his brothers were jealous of him, and they didn't like him. He was kind of arrogant and young, dumb, and full of cum. And he was like, hey, I had this dream, guys, that like I would one day be like ruling over you, and all of you would have me to thank for like all of your successes. And they were like, oh my God, fuck this shit. So they tried to kill him, and they're like, our dad will never forgive us. So then they sold him into like slavery and sold him to Egypt. And then he was like well received in Egypt. So he moved up and through the ranks. And then this chick was like one of the people high up, and he was in the priesthood, and they were kind of attracted to each other. She kept trying to seduce him, but she was married, and he was like, no, I can't, I have to run away. And so then she was like, he raped me. It was just like Atonement. Have you guys ever seen that movie? So good, with Keira Knightley and that other dude, James McAvoy. And so he went to prison for a long time. But the thing is that Joseph was able to know that God was with him through these things and could be activated within these things. And so Joseph knew that like God was taking care of him. He saw him every single time, like saved him from the pit of scorpions and snakes, and lifted him up through his slavery. And so he knew something would come of even this. So he became a spiritual master in jail, and became like a master at interpreting dreams. That was always the thing with him, his dreams, right? So Pharaoh comes to him to interpret one of his dreams, and then Joseph gets it right, and Pharaoh lifts Joseph up to the status of king, who then becomes the distributor of the wealth in the kingdom. So from a Kabbalistic interpretation here, we're learning and we're repeating the message over and over again to find that light in the darkness, to turn that bitterness to sweetness, to see that the Creator is moving through your life in all times and all places, and can be activated within our lives when we surrender what we think should be happening and we give ourselves to the divine purpose and flow and trust the process and let go, but also show up to the best of our ability within it, right? And we trust that whatever is unfolding to like kind of ping pong us into our ultimate potential. So if we allow it, right, you know, we can't become a victim of our circumstance and, you know, bemoan and complain and become sad and despair and create division, because then that cuts us off from receiving our blessings, right? So again, that's another theme of the, you know, the preparation leading up to Hanukkah and through the Advent is finding forgiveness and, you know, bringing unification where there's been division and separation. And many of us, myself included, are having difficulties with people in our lives. We always are, but probably now more than ever, because the intensity of everything and the polarity is just turned up to 11. You know, it's like we're reliving the gospel almost verbatim in real time. And so, like Jesus talked about, you know, when I come, I come like a sword, and I divide people, sometimes 1 against 5, sometimes 2 against 4 in one house, you know? So again, we have to figure out how to bridge the gap and be able to hold the space of disagreement, but still hold one another in love. Which is difficult when you are trying to navigate between, you know, figuring out how to set boundaries for the first time and catching your breath and processing, and then trying to come back in together with, you know, tender triggers and things. So it's a messy process. It's a messy process. That's why there wasn't room in the inn for Mary to give birth to Christ, because it was crowded and noisy and full of all the people, you know, and places and things from the village, right? They had to go into the stable, into the heart, into the quiet, into the cold, into being exposed and being there with the raw kind of like messiness and shit. But also the interesting thing is that one of the things about the Zohar portion today was that it points out the fact that animals are born with the instinct to flee from fire and evil places in order to protect themselves. And human beings are born with the evil inclination to kind of chase after that shiny carrot. And that is the ticket that, you know, we have to be here as souls. That's our process. That's our free will right there. It's that we have that gravity working against us that we get to overcome in order to really evolve and strengthen and rise up over our opponent, right? So this week we are joy to the world, the Lord is come, proclaiming the good truth. You know, we just had all this energy flow through from that Gemini new moon, putting all kinds of energy into bringing feelings and notions and senses and things that we maybe have been intuiting into clarity, into revelation, into ideas that we can now express in a new way, in a new level, and quite frankly could be literally expanded. Our reach could be expanded, or the way our words land on people could finally start taking root, could finally start taking hold, can finally get through, you know, the noise. And so it is, you know, the theme of this time of year is to declare the good gospel, the good news, the coming of the possibility of change, of transformation, of salvation, of redemption, right? Of the collective human soul. And I think that we need that more than ever. But I think too, we have to declare that Christ is going to move in our own life, and we don't see it coming. You know, we can't find it. It's so dark. The times are difficult. You know, Christ was born in the midst of a genocide, right? In Bethlehem. Sound familiar? You know? And so Christ isn't born under perfect circumstances, but in imperfect ones. Mary, when Mary and Joseph lost Jesus in the caravan at Passover, I thought it was interesting because even Mary and Joseph, they sort of let their guard down and they let the Christ get away from them. And they just assumed he was just going to be there. They took for granted that he was just with them on their path, on their journey. And they started wringing their hands and sorrowfully looking for him everywhere, amongst their neighbors, amongst their friends, amongst their acquaintances. So they went to the easy, obvious places where they're like, well, we're familiar with finding you here, right? Isn't this where I'm going to find Christ? Is this where he ran off to? I'm used to, seems like this is, the obvious place he'd be, or where I thought he'd be, or where I'm comfortable looking for him. But it wasn't there that they found Christ. It was when they had to retrace their steps and go back all the way back to Jerusalem, and leave the current trajectory they were on and go themselves searching the city day and night and finally finding him when it dawns on them to go into the temple, where they found him teaching and expounding upon ideas that were leaving even the high priest baffled. And then they were like, oh my God, Jesus, how could you have done this to us? And he was like, we've been in misery looking for you. And he was like, why would you have been so worried? Didn't you know that I would be in my Father's house? Hello, you didn't have to be so worried. You didn't have to take so long to get here to figure it out. You looked everywhere else first before the obvious place where you'd find me, the place you knew I'd be all along, the place I was supposed to be, here in my home, in my home of homes. You didn't think to look for me here, of all places? Why didn't you come straight here to begin with? Then you wouldn't have had to suffer. Then you wouldn't have been running around in circles, running and running, looking for me everywhere outside of yourself, except for going inward in stillness and thinking, okay, God, where's the first place I should look for you? And then after that, they were all just befuddled, and they didn't even understand what Jesus just said. They didn't understand. Even the mother of God, who kind of understood what Jesus was all about before anyone else, was befuddled, and they took that away. They didn't understand what he said, but she took with the words that he said and held them in her heart. Meaning, I don't know what this means, but I'm holding it in my heart, and hopefully I can ponder this and ponder this and ponder this, and maybe one day it will reveal itself to me what this means. But I don't know, but I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm going to hold it in my heart, right? So when we don't understand the process through which we have found Christ, or we come by finding Christ in a situation, it's like, seeing the Creator on hindsight when he's leaving. It's like learning and understanding, after the fact. It's like knowing that in the moment, hey, I know I don't see the God's face right now. I know I don't understand this. I know it's not comprehending, but I know it's here. I know that I will recognize it later. I'm going to tuck it away, right? I'm not going to dismiss it, move on, forget about it. I'm holding on to it because I know I will recognize God in this moment later. I just have to stick with it and be open. Oh my gosh, you guys, double emphasis on communication and sharing our truth and speaking our truth and our ideas, speaking blessing into our life, speaking new creation. This is a time where we are planting seeds for huge new beginnings, right? The conjunction between Neptune and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries in February, I think the 19th, is going to be enormous. It's the end of a 330-year cycle. 333 and it is the beginning of a new 333-year cycle, or 330-year cycle. So again, this is the ultimate cardinal, this is the time where we're planting seeds in that dark, fertile soil, and we're speaking new truths, and we're speaking living wisdom and speaking blessings into the new chapter that is being birthed. We are declaring that we are making change, and that we are loving the change, and we're embodying the change, and that new Christ consciousness is being born again into our lives. So what do we need in order to have words, to have a voice? Is breath. Interesting here. We have the lungs, We have the breath that moves the air, right? And what is air? It is ideas, right? It's the swords suit in the tarot. The air is ideas, thoughts, consciousness. So the way that our capacity to move our consciousness through into what is nameable of what we were going to speak our truth here, right? We have the instrument, the conviction to push these thoughts through into reality through the way that we speak them. So, and two, what else do we know about the lungs when we associate the lungs and the breath? We associate that with finding stillness, with sitting, with discipline, with stillness, with quiet, with space, with the empty, with the void, with the darkness, right? That's how we receive. It's when we stop running around, when we're running around and we're not conscious, we're breathing shallowly, and we're not feeding ourselves with what we need to fully function, right? On a physical level, on a spiritual level, on a soul level. So when we want to create more space, when we want to slow down, when we want to regulate our nervous system and start to begin the process of dropping into that heart space, what do? What does somebody tell you to do? Breathe. What does somebody tell you to do when they want you to pause before you continue on in a reactive state? But pause, calm down, transform your energy. They tell you stop, go take a breath, breathe, right? So spirit we have got something to say on behalf of spirit. Spirit, this is the time that spirit of year where we reflect on God sending his messengers to earth, right? God comes to the shepherds and to the wise men and to the women beforehand and brings the good news through words, through messages, through angels, through messengers. Gabriel is associated with communications, right? So the whole theme that opens us up into the Advent in the beginning of Luke are continuous references to angels bringing messages to people of the coming of a new day, a new dawn, a new way of living, a new consciousness, something that's going to redeem people and something that is going to change the face of humanity, right? So this season, for all of us in our pilgrimage through this, and I love to observe all of the facets of the interrelation of the symbolism and the discovery of Christ within nature, which are the pagan observations, right? The watching of the sun and the solstice, the watching of the body of the earth go into its dormancy and pregnancy, and the shedding of the blood and of the body, the mystery of birth and death, and then it all relates back. It's telling, because the universe, nature is always telling the story of the gospel, whether we're looking at it in the sky or we're hearing people start to channel it through their voices. Everything from the trees of the field, right, to the birds of the trees are spreading the gospel. So, and then it's, mirrored in our process through Hanukkah of transmuting that darkness into light and allowing that light to come into the world, right? And the first demonstration of what Christ would do to sacrifice himself for the sake of the world and humanity was in Adam's 8-day fast through the quickening of the darkness as a result of the fall. During the fall equinox, Adam was under the impression that sin was going to return the entire earth and existence and humanity as we know it back to formlessness and darkness. And so the 8 days of Hanukkah were originally the opening of the cosmic windows, initiated by Adam's fast. And he said, I'm not going to eat or take anything in, and I'm going to pray and connect with God constantly until the light returns. And so by the third day after solstice, that's when the light starts to crack through and break through, and the quality of the light during the day becomes brighter again, and the days become longer, right? And then we see in the solstice that shortest day of the year is like the Christ's crucifixion. The 3 days that we are like hovering in that darkness is the 3 days that Christ went into the underworld. And then by Christmas Day, Christ is born into the world. The sun has been reborn, and the days, the new light enters in to start heralding in the coming of new days, the coming of a new year, right? Is soon. It's not here yet, right? When we get the news, it's like this is at the seed level. This is in the pregnancy stage, right? So, reflecting on how is new life being birthed into your life? How is new consciousness being birthed into your life? How is new love, new compassion, new tenderness, new understanding, new awareness, new unity being birthed into your life through even darkness and difficulty and challenge, right? And that is, the essence of what we're looking for in the darkness in this season, is we're searching out that darkness in us. And as we reveal that light of Christ within us, as it's birthed within our hearts, it changes our hearts, and then it changes our minds and our perception. And we start to bring out that light from within us into the world, into our words, into our actions, into our deeds, into our being, right? And through that new radiance, it spills out. Our cup runneth over into the next cup. All right, y'all, that's all for tonight. We will be back together tomorrow for our weekly anchor message. Until then, peace be with you. Ciao.